So now that we have introduced a proof by contradiction for these implication style statements, let's go ahead and see an example of this proof technique in action. So let's consider the following example. Prove that if 3n plus 2 is odd, then n is odd. And I'm assuming here, just by the very fact that I'm talking about odds, I'm assuming that this n right here is an integer. So you can see that this indeed is an implication statement. It's a P implies Q because it's an if-then. So this first part, that's my hypothesis P, and this second part, n is odd, that's my conclusion, or my Q. So if I wanted to prove this by contradiction, how would I do that? So once again, you declare what proof technique you are using. So in search of a contradiction, I am going to assume P and not Q. So here is my P, so I assume that that's true. And I assume not Q. So I assume n is not odd, so I assume that it's even. And somehow from this, I need to derive a contradiction. So where to start? Well, I have two pieces of information. I have that this expression is odd and this expression is even. So I'm going to start with n being even and see if that leads me anywhere. I'm starting there simply because n is a slightly simpler expression than 3n plus 2. So by definition, since n is even, there exists some other integer k such that n equals 2k. So I have an expression for n, and I've used this part. Let's go ahead and now use this part. What does n equaling 2k say about the expression 3n plus 2? So if we go ahead and plug in this expression for n, we get 3n plus 2 is going to equal 2k plus 2. And then if I simplify this out, I get 6k plus 2. Ah, I could factor out a 2. And I factored out a 2, and so I have showed that 3n plus 2 is actually even. And do you see how that's a contradiction? Here I have 3n plus 2 is even, but I have assumed that 3n plus 2 is odd. So this statement and this statement cannot coexist together. This is a contradiction. 3n plus 2 cannot both be even and odd at the same time. And so by my proof of contradiction process, I can then conclude that my original statement is true. My original statement said, if 3n plus 2 is odd, then n is odd. And I've been able to prove it by contradiction. So it's very important for proofs by contradiction of implications to be able to properly identify what your hypothesis is and what your conclusion is. And then remembering that you need to assume your hypothesis and assume the negation of your conclusion.